Well, let's talk about policy now. The Conservatives don't want to be seen as setting Chinese-style limits on the number of children you have. They are treading very cautiously. But they do want to save money on welfare, and we now know one thing they're thinking as a result. If they win the next election, they're considering limiting the amount of child benefit a family can get to 3 children. It was political editor Allegra who found out this was on the cards.
The benefits of having children, all the fun of the fair, and from the 1950s, 5 shillings a week for a family's second child, a child benefit payment intended to rebuild Britain's post-war depleted population. By the 70s, first-time mums became eligible, and in the 90s, it became more generous. Child benefit, in recognition that the state benefits from another generation. £20.30 for the first child, £13.40 for additional children, valued by millions, George Osborne said in 2009. The Work and Pension Secretary Ian Duncan-Smith recently proposed stopping it at 2 children, but was beaten back by the Chancellor, too hideously close to a British one-child policy. Perhaps until now.
Newsnight understands that the Treasury is softening to this idea in some form. It's examining proposals that would cap child benefit payments for more than 3 children. It wouldn't apply to so-called stock, that is families right now that have 4 children or more. That was thought, in the words of one source, to be too draconian, but instead it could apply to families in the future that do have more than 4.
Revenue and Customs show that in 2013 there were over 7.5 million families. The average family has 1.7 children. Just over 320,000 families have more than 4 children. Had the government adopted Ian Duncan-Smith's cap on 2 children, this would have affected nearly 1.2 million families, over a sixth of all families in the UK. A cap at 3 children would hit fewer people, but what's the point?
If you're not thinking through the financial impact of a 4th child, or that you would really struggle because you didn't have child benefit for a 4th child, there's a bigger question about, as far as you can ever plan these things, should you at that stage be looking to grow the family? And I think the child benefit is about saying we'll support children, we recognise the additional costs, but there isn't a blank cheque here. And if you look at where the biggest families are, they're either at the poorer end, getting a lot of child benefit, or they're at the wealthier end, which now is of course included child benefit.
A poll for the centre-right think tank Policy Exchange in 2011 asked whether voters agreed with the following statement: people who have more than 3 children should not get extra child benefit if they have a 4th. They showed that a ratio of nearly 2 to 1 respondents agreed. This was largest among Tory voters, but Labour voters supported the idea too. Lib Dems were in the middle, although all of them were tough on large families. Senior Tories are worried that Britain's ethnic minorities, a group they want to win over, could be hit by this policy. The worry is that black and minority ethnic families are larger. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show that in 2013, white families had an average of 1.7 children, Indian families also had 1.7, but other Asian backgrounds had an average of 1.9, and Pakistani and Bangladeshi families averages of 2.3 and 2.5 children each.
They'd have some serious things to think through. So, for example, does it go directly to the mother still? Does it apply if you've got different fathers involved? This particularly applies if you take it down to the welfare system. How do you introduce it in a way that means current existing claimants don't lose out? It would have to be for incoming claimants only. That creates a 2-tier system. So there's lots of things to work through.
Limiting child benefit to 3 children would save you about £300 million a year in the long run. However, if you only introduce that for new children, it would obviously take you about 18 years before you get that level of saving, meaning that if you're looking at trying to save a lot of money in the next spending review period, when the Conservatives want to make £12 billion of cuts to the social security budget, it's really not going to get you that far towards that total.
The Chancellor has said he'd like to find £12 billion in welfare cuts in order to protect other departments from deeper cuts in the next Parliament. The expectation is fast becoming that in any future negotiations between Tories and Lib Dems, the Lib Dems might force him to lower that £12 billion welfare cut figure. Capping child benefit at more than 3 children could be one of the few welfare policies the two parties agree on.
Take the controversial benefit cap. It saved under 300 million. This government has form on finely targeted cuts that release fire and fury more than finance and funds. The next round of welfare cuts or reform, whatever you want to call it, will not be taking candy from a baby.